Hello and welcome back to Bourbon Barrel Talk. I'm your host, Scott Minton. Today we are at Jack Daniel's and we are meeting with the Master Distiller, Chris Fletcher. How you doing today, Chris?
Doing great. Thanks for coming.
Hey, thanks for having us out. This is an awesome experience for us. I mean, the last time I was at Jack Daniel's, I was like 21, 22 years old, so it's been over 25 years, and the rest of us, I don't think, had ever been here. So this is a really neat and nice experience for us.
I think it's kind of like a mecca to be able to make it your way here to Lynchburg, Tennessee.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a fantastic distillery. I think when people come and they see it and experience it, they're really surprised to see how we make whiskey, which, I mean, that's kind of my favorite thing to talk about, so I'm looking forward to it.
Good deal. So, but before we dive too deep into the whiskey, I always kind of like to get a little bit of a background on somebody. So if you don't mind, just tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got here, and then if you want to just maybe tell us maybe a hobby you like to do or something about your family or something kind of cool.
Okay, yeah. So I grew up 3 miles right up this road right here. My parents' house, they still live there.
Just a whole 3 miles, huh?
Yeah, whole 3 miles. Yeah, with Lynchburg traffic, that's about a 2-minute commute, I think. So, and actually, my wife and I and my 4-year-old son, we live, very near there now. I'm about 4 miles from the distillery today. Grew up here in Lynchburg, though. In Lynchburg, we're in the second smallest county in the state of Tennessee. And of course, with a distillery like we have, most people are connected. I was connected through my grandfather, my mom's dad. He was the distiller here for many years, started working here in 1957 and retired in 1989. And so I was around the distillery, a little with him when I was young, but he retired when I was 8 years old. So, I didn't understand even what whiskey was, certainly what Jack Daniel's was when you're that young. You're just hanging out with your granddad, right? So
it was one of those things of like, as a kid, I remember the old adage that, grandparents would take a little dab of whiskey if you had like a toothache or you're cutting teeth, rub a little bit of whiskey on the gums.
Yeah, you can. My grandmother may have been guilty of that. Everybody thinks my granddad, gave me my first taste of whiskey. Nope, it was Grandma. It was Nana. She got it.
That's how my grandparents dealt with each other.
Yeah, right. And so when he retired, I was 8, and I wasn't around the distillery other than you drive by every day here, going to school or whatever, and. I went away to college. I was studying chemistry and happened to get a summer job here halfway through school after my second year. And my parents wanted me to get a job for the summer, and so I was lucky enough to get a job here. And as a tour guide is how I started actually. I came and took a tour with my buddy from college who wanted to just come down and take the tour and see the distillery. And so we're walking through here, and I just thought, wow, that's a perfect summer job. All I get to do is walk around and talk. Easy. So that's how I started, and got lucky. A couple years later, finished up with a degree in chemistry, and the company was hiring in Louisville at Brown-Forman. So our research and development department's still located there in Louisville, in downtown Louisville. So that was great for me, a kid from Lynchburg, moving back to a town, the size of about 600 people when you're 22. Yeah, not exactly top of the list. I love Lynchburg. It's a great place to be and raise a family. But Louisville was a great spot to start. And in R&D, during my time from 2003 through 2011, we acquired tequila business. I got to work on projects at our cooperage, worked on loads of projects down here in Lynchburg, Kentucky whiskeys, Canadian whiskeys, you name it. So that was a great place to start. Did that for almost 9 years. Actually left the company, went to another producer in Kentucky for a couple of years as their lead chemist. And then it was probably like late 2013, I got a call from Jeff Arnett, and he wanted to hire an assistant master distiller. And so brought me home, and really excited to be here and very fortunate to be in this role now.
So you mentioned that, you kind of have whiskey in your bloodline, right? With your grandpa?
That's right. Yep.
And Frank, and didn't he have a nickname like Frog or something?
Frog, yeah.
Yeah, that's I always wanted a cool nickname. I never got one.
Yeah.
I don't know how that.
You stay in Lynchburg long enough, you'll get one.
Maybe that's what I need to do.
I'm not going to promise you it'll be cool, but you'll get one.
So obviously you probably learned a little from him, just from conversations and things like that. But you obviously didn't work under him. But who are maybe some other master distillers that you've worked with, whether at Brown-Forman or the other place that were an influence of you today?
Yeah, I mean, so many people. My grandfather was definitely the biggest. And I think looking back on it now, even more so than I probably realized at the time. He was a chemist, like me, and during his time, you have to remember, he started in January of '57. Jack Daniel's had just become allocated. It didn't come off allocation until almost 1980. So almost his entire career, Old Number 7 was completely allocated. You couldn't walk into a bar anywhere in the country and expect they were going to have it.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And we were the original whiskey you could not find and wanted to. And so, that's amazing. Now we had people like Frank Sinatra and the Rolling Stones and, countless others to thank for that. And, it's amazing of where the brand came. And I think, with him, it was all about doing the same thing every day, day in and day out. And I think about what he and that team of people and distillers did during that time. He would come in at 4:30 every morning, 6-7 days a week. Christmas morning, he was in here at 4:30 in the morning. He'd go home and open, presents with my mom and her sister, and then come back and finish out the day. I mean, it was just the times that they were going through building a barrel house about every 6 weeks that holds 20,000 barrels, with not changing the flavor of the whiskey. Obviously, that's incredible. So yeah, massive influence on me, and even very late in his life when he was, well into his 80s, and being at in and around many distilleries, and seeing things and discussing distillery operations, and thinking in my head, that just doesn't. I don't think that's going to work. And literally stepping out on lunch break and calling him and asking him his opinion on how this doubler was operating and flow rates and things and how it worked, and he'd be like, "Yeah, no, that's not going to work." So, at 86 years old or whatever he was, I don't know at the time, but there's just countless times with him. He was a massive influence on me, and it was absolutely for him. You don't change anything. You don't ever change anything, which is still a lot of our philosophy today. Other people, when I started working in Louisville, Kentucky, in R&D, a lady there, Sophie Hummer, who is probably not a name that you recognize, but I would say probably, if not the industry leader, I'd love to see who's better than her at sensory sciences, tasting whiskey for quality and spirits for quality. And she does a lot of great things at Brown-Forman. Not only that, but really from her she taught me how to taste whiskey really for quality. Very much so. She was a huge influence on me. And I've gotten to work with a lot of other great distillers and blenders. I had a couple of years with Sazerac. Harlan Wheatley, think the world of him. Drew Mayville, worked directly with him, and Mark Brown and team there, where they were great to work with for a few years. Got to some old distillers in Kentucky. Glenn Glazier, who ran the Brown-Forman distillery for years. Leo Redinger before him, who was a buddy of my granddad's. I think this industry, it's such a, I don't know. I mean, the word gentleman's industry kind of sounds really old-fashioned to me. I don't like the way that sounds, but it's very familial, I think. Very much we are a family of, American whiskey makers here in Lynchburg, families of American whiskey makers, in Kentucky and around, and, this kind of southeast and Midwest part of the country, that's, a big part of, our history and what families here have done for generations. And so I think that permeates through the whole industry.
So just kind of can you walk us through your 4 to 5 most important tasks as master distiller here at Jack Daniel's? What would you say your role focuses on specifically that you can share with us?
I think first, consistency. Old number 7 has to be the same. Has to be the same. Whether you're here, whether you're in Nashville, whether you're in China, that bottle of Old Number 7 has to be the same. And, my granddad would say, it's like making a cake. Every day you go to work, you bake a cake. You don't ever change the recipe. You keep it always the same. And that sounds really, really simple, but you think about, there is variation of ingredients, right? I mean, year in and year out, crop variation, corn, rye, malted barley, subtle variations, not as much with wood, but there can be, depending on, what the demand on white oak is and the current state of the industry and how many barrels are being made, kind of through the industry and other industries. So, there can be things that you don't see coming. And you've got to make sure that you can take that and make sure that, the consistency of that product doesn't change. So that's at the top of the list and will always be. I think, also now probably a little more obvious, some of the innovative stuff we've been able to do, while fun and really unique and interesting. Let's look it down right here. We've got Bonded Tennessee Whiskey, named number 1 whiskey of the year in 2022. Same exact recipe as every bottle of Old Number 7, made the same way. Yeah, a little higher proof point, obviously, with the bottle and bond reg.
Yeah, a lot of times it's amazing. You just change the proofage just a little bit. How much that flavor it could change it. It's still the same base,
Yeah.
but it just brings a different depth and consistency.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and obviously we're in a state, right now, continued, I think, with the industry that American whiskey is I would argue more popular than it's ever been in the history of the country, even post Prohibition. I think the last 10 years or so have just been incredible in American whiskey, and I mean just a flood of brands. I mean hundreds, 300-400, bourbon brands alone that are out there. I mean not necessarily different distilleries, but brands. It's amazing. Everybody wants in. People, investors from New York want in America. Like, what is going on? When I started in Louisville in 2003, that was unheard of, completely unheard of. And so it's amazing. And what a time to be in whiskey. So, the innovation stuff we've done things that are very much, reflections of our past. The age-stated whiskeys that we've released in the last couple of years, that's literally just a recreation of what Jack Daniel was doing when he was alive. So, we can't take it. I mean, the whiskey's beautiful, don't get me wrong, but, I mean, that's just, honoring what Jack did himself. That's pretty easy, and but things like this triple mash, which is, I think, I don't know of any other whiskey ever been done like that with 3 different bottled and bond whiskeys in one bottle. So, it's a lot of fun to do that. So yeah, the innovation, the consistency, the quality department here, it does roll under me. We've got great people. And I would say that would be kind of a third thing that we have a team, probably about 30 to 40 men and women here that are in charge from anything from the quality of the incoming grains all the way to, this glass, the labels, the corks, everything that finishes out a bottle, which I just know just enough to be dangerous about glass. But we've got great people that know more than me on my team about glass. So super thankful for them. And then the last piece I would say, just kind of round it out, is, there's some ambassador work now that goes along with being master distiller. And the job has completely evolved. When my granddad was here, he never went in. I think right after he retired, they sent him to Australia. He and my grandma went down and did this whole tour and met people and fans of Jack Daniels. And then they brought him home. And a couple months later, they were like, let's send you to New York. And they made him do a bunch of media. And he got home and he said, yeah, I'm done. I'm retired. No more of this. And so, but obviously now that's changed a lot. Master distillers, do wear some ambassador hats, and that's a lot of fun too. And I love talking about making whiskey. You probably already tell, but to me, we've got such a great story to tell, and we've got such a great process, and that's what I love talking about.
During those formative summers when you were doing tour guiding, did the thought enter your mind that you wanted to do what your grandpa did, or was it just one day, hey, I think I'm going to pursue this?
Yeah, I mean, I think you start thinking about, once you're about halfway through college, what the heck am I going to do? Am I going to go to grad school? I mean, chemistry. So, you're going to do something like pharmacy, again, more school. That got less and less attractive the longer I was going through it, to be honest. And, I think somewhere along the way, I thought, well, that'd be a lot more fun than a lot of things you do with chemistry. And so that's kind of what kind of sparked it for me. And then obviously my granddad and his influence and questions I could ask him. And, I thought maybe I could be good at it. So here we are. So
what made a country boy from Lynchburg, Tennessee say, hey, I want to go to college to study chemistry?
You may not believe me, but this is really the truth. I had no freaking idea, man. I didn't know. I enjoyed chemistry. I did in high school. I had a chemistry teacher that I really loved. And, with chemistry, I think I've told this story. As a kid, there was a TV show called MacGyver. Oh, yeah. You ever saw that?
100%.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The last 10 seconds of every episode, right?
Yeah, exactly, right? And so, he'd be trapped in a vault and take some bubble gum and peanut butter and blow it up and escape and save the day. And it's like, wow, that's cool. I want to learn how to do that. And so maybe it was from watching too much MacGyver as a kid. I don't know. But, to me, I really enjoyed the labs. You felt like you kind of learned something different. It was hands-on. It wasn't just reading a textbook. You got to go and do lab a couple times a week, 3 times a week, whatever it was. So I enjoyed it.
So talking about mash bills, because I really want to start tasting some of this stuff.
Okay.
I always like to drink. So I believe it's, 80% corn, 8 rye, and 12 malted barley.
That's right.
For the regular. And then the rye is 70 rye, 18 corn, and then still that 12 malted.
Yes.
Okay, that's still correct. So what kind of flavors are you looking for when you're putting all those together to make it work?
Yeah, so I mean, grain bill. I mean, in my opinion, and look, I'm not going to speak obviously for anybody else, but I would put it fairly far down the list of flavor impact. So I mean, I know there's lots of small micro distilleries that are really kind of pushing boundaries, and that's really cool. But in general, most bourbons are 70 to 80% corn, hopefully close to at least 10% malted barley, and then the rest is either wheat or rye. There's really no secrets, that's what everybody's doing. And obviously there's a lot of different flavors and a lot of different styles and a lot of different things that go on within that scope of bourbon and Tennessee whiskey. And so to me, what really drives flavor difference, mostly for us, is the yeast. And I would say that's the truth for any distillery. And so one of the things that I talk about, one of our sister distilleries is the Woodford Reserve Distillery in Kentucky. We could take their grain bill and push it through here at 72, I think, percent corn. And I don't know, I've slept since then. I've got a 4-year-old, so you'll have to excuse me. But if we just use that grain bill with our yeast, guess what? It's going to taste pretty much like Jack Daniels. But if we kept our grain bill the same and we just brought their yeast in and pulled our yeast out, it wouldn't be anywhere close, right? So that yeast activity and what it's doing and what it's laying down in fermentation, that's literally going to start the building blocks of what's going to go on in flavor development all along, even once it gets into the barrel and sits for years. And so that's really the big thing. I'm glad you called out grain bill, though, because that's one of the things. I want everybody to know exactly what we do here. I want everybody to learn how we make whiskey. I want you to know our grain bill and why our grain bill is what it is. Minimum 12% malted barley in any recipe that we make. And the reason for that is we only rely on that malted barley for the enzymatic activity to break down starch to fermentable sugar. Every whiskey in the world is made from cereal grain, right? Grains store their carbohydrate as starch. Starch is not fermentable. You cannot make it fermentable by just cooking it in water. You can add more water. You can add more heat. You can do it for longer. Guess what? You're not going to make any whiskey. You're just going to make a big pot of grits if you're using corn, right? All that starch, right? And it's just going to gelatinize, but it will not dissolve. And if it can't dissolve, yeast can't even consume it, right? Starch is far too big of a molecule for yeast to even see as a food source. And so there's a couple ways of going about that now. I mean, traditionally, you would have to malt some grain, right? You would have to let some grain sprout. That sprout will create the enzymes. Those sprouts are actually breaking down their internal starches to make sugar, right? In every little seed of barley. But when we get that malted barley, we grind it, we add it to our grits. Those enzymes are cutting up those starches. So think of it like a pair of scissors. Another way you can do it now is you can buy an enzyme that's been harvested, GMO organism, mold or something like that, and it has been, engineered to break down starch extremely efficiently. So instead of scissors, it's more like a shotgun blast. And it explodes that starch to its very simplest form, which is glucose, a single sugar. That's going to speed up fermentation. It's going to be much cheaper than buying malted grain that's been harvested in Montana and sprouted and shipped to Lynchburg,
Right.
But you know what? That's the way my granddad made whiskey. Now, we can measure today in our labs the difference in the activity of that malted enzyme versus a harvested enzyme that we would buy from a chemical company. Instead of that single glucose, those scissors are going so much slower, it feeds double and triple sugars, much larger forms of sugar for the yeast in fermentation. That's what our yeast is fermenting, right? As opposed to a glucose-based fermentation. It's kind of like the all-you-can-eat buffet, right? They're going to stuff themselves. They're done in about 3 days, man. Woof, over. Our fermentations go out 6 days, easily, right? That's what we want. We want it long, low, and slow, getting it to about 12% alcohol, hopefully, close to that anyway. And so that's a big, big difference. When the yeast is in there for 6 days and all that activity, not only is it making the ethanol from those sugars, it's also breaking down other food sources, amino acids and things, and making higher alcohols, fusel oils. There's lots of organic acids that are made in fermentation. When you react acids and alcohols together, you get things called esters. You said you were getting itchy to taste. Just pick up that old number 7, and this just knows it. Yeah, if you want to taste, go ahead and taste. You get a nice, sweet, fruity nose, apple peel, green, really juicy, ripe green pear, banana, apricot. Guess what? Those are esters. those esters are being created, and the things that will create them are being laid down in that fermentation. The longer that yeast is in that fermentation, the longer it has to start putting that thumbprint, I call it, of flavor on the spirit. And so that is a huge thing, relying on only the natural malted barley enzyme.
Nice. Just as a quick follow-up, as you were talking about yeast, how old is your yeast strain, or how far can you trace it back?
I love it, because if you go to all this effort for yeast food, right, and what we're going to feed this yeast, what about the yeast itself? Love it. And so a lot of people talk about proprietary this, proprietary that. No such thing at Jack Daniel's. There's nothing proprietary. I want everybody to know about our grain bill. I want everybody to know about our yeast. So let's talk about yeast. We have a microbiologist here on our staff. Her name is Janessa Grieve. She's wonderful. One of her main goals is to cultivate our yeast. She's growing it from the mother culture yeast strain. We can date that yeast back to Prohibition, to 1938. Same yeast my granddad would have used. Now, back in the day, they didn't quite have a lab and a microbiologist. They kept it in a jug, and
Right.
If it needed to be cold, well, put it in the creek. Let's see
Put it
what
in the
happens.
spring, yep.
Yeah, exactly. So, we have identified over the years and cleaned that into a monoculture, purified that yeast to a single strain of yeast that creates the flavor and the specific profile that we want in this whiskey. And so that is critical. I mean, that is the heartbeat of any distillery. Now, we don't share our yeast with anybody else. We do keep it frozen in freezers as a backup at our sister distilleries throughout Brown-Forman, but that's it. So obviously our yeast is a proprietary thing, right? So, we don't allow anybody else to use that, but literally growing that up every week with her hands, that she will eventually grow to, in a little flask, and grow it up to a 9-liter jug. And it's kind of it looks sort of like a dark beer, and there's some malt sugar in there and things and proteins and, pH adjusted for what it's going to see once it's in the distillery. Literally with her own hands, she is inoculating from those 9-liter jugs into what we call a yeast mash, that we're growing just the small grains, rye and barley. We're cooking that in the cave water and growing up to 1,700 gallons. That's what we need for any one single fermentation here, 1,700 gallons of yeast. Obviously, Janessa, that you can't haul 1,700 gallons of yeast out of the lab. So we're propagating that yeast food. Now think about how would you have kept yeast alive in Jack's day? You take some of your grain, some water, you would cook it to make some yeast food and sterilize it, put your yeast in it, cap it, keep it cold. Right, it's the same exact process, just on a bigger scale. Completely separate mashing system dedicated to only yeast mash. There's 2 separate mash houses traditionally in a distillery. One dedicated only to yeast growth, yeast health. The other then making the food for the fermentation part of the process. Right.
So when those ester chains break down and you really are diving into what whiskey is, right? So you get the 2 big main flavor profiles, and I think I've heard you say this, and you kind of mentioned it a little bit. It's the barrel and the yeast, right? So
Yes.
That being said, what makes the combination of what you guys do, whether it be a char 4 or char 3, and that yeast brand that brings out that like banana and like baking spice, and it's just so prevalent. Like, I mean, it doesn't matter if it's the rye, if it's the bourbon. I mean, it's just it's such a consistent taste, and you kind of know what you're going to get. I always tell people, like, Jack Daniel's is Novocaine. It works every time. It's the same thing. You know exactly what you're getting when you buy it.
Yep. Really great point. Couldn't said it better myself. At the crux of that, it is the yeast and the yeast metabolism and what it's laying down and the combination of things that's being made in fermentation. Because a lot of those things are going to be distilled into the spirit itself. Not everything, but a lot of those things will. And it's something that we haven't talked about, but it's kind of the next part of the process to kind of dip our toe a little bit. At 80% corn, in our bourbon recipe or our Tennessee whiskey recipe, off the still, the spirit has a lot of that corn note to it. Cereal grain, kind of sweet cream style corn flake. Very, very common in bourbon whiskeys. It's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But we knows that old number 7 a minute ago, you didn't pick up a lot of corn there. For an 80% corn recipe, I mean, this is probably going to average around 52 months old. 4.5 to 5 years old is about where it's going to sit. That's pretty surprising to think that you're not getting much of that corn note. Well, that's because of the charcoal mellowing, right? And so the mellowing, a couple things, I'll go real quick on it. I don't know how much we can dive in deep if you want. It doesn't matter. But where I'm going with this to kind of tie into it is the mellowing process. What that really does in the Tennessee whiskey is it lifts a lot of the heavy kind of corn oiliness out of it. We cannot measure corn oil in our new make spirit. I believe that's what it is because when I smell it and taste it, That is what I'm looking for in those mellowing vats, is the reduction in that cereal grain character in that new make spirit. And so by removing a lot of that heavy, corny aroma and flavor, all of a sudden those fruity, estery, almost floral at that point, almost like a honeysuckle flower. If you ever smell that in spring, in our new make, it starts to just pop out of there. Now those flavors, those aromas, they're in the new make spirit right off the still. But there's just so much of that kind of heavy corn that's compressing and suppressing that, I should say. You don't pick up on it as much. It's just not as defined. There's sweetness there, but there's so much graininess that goes along with it, you don't really get it. And so that's really, let's go back. There's so much sweetness there underneath the corn oils and things. It's hard to pick up on that. And so by removing the heavy grainy character, which is what the charcoal mellowing process does, now you're starting to pick up on the impact that the yeast really makes on the flavor of the whiskey. So the yeast drives that. Now you will get continuing esterification reactions and things that happen in the barrel, right? Because you have different forms of alcohols in whiskey, in all whiskeys. Again, it's slightly acidic, so you're going to get those esterification reactions going on. You're also going to have oxidations and reductions, and different things that are going to happen in that barrel. Now, so the barrel itself is not necessarily, it's not contributing that, the wood itself is not contributing that, but what it does contribute is, obviously extraction. So when you start to talk about all those kind of sweet brown spice notes, caramels, vanillas, brown sugars, butterscotch, honey, all of that is coming from that red layer, really the toasted layer of that barrel. The char itself is charcoal. There's not adding flavor. The charcoal mellowing process adds no flavor at all. The whiskey goes in clear, comes out clear. There's nothing added. I always tell people, if you use a water filter in your kitchen at home, well, guess what's inside? Charcoal, carbon. When you run your water through it, does it add flavor? No, it takes stuff out. And that's what the mellowing process also does for us. So,
and it was really neat on our tour. We got to see the furnace burning the ricks.
Awesome.
Now is it maple ash or maple tree?
Hard maple. Yep.
Hard maple. Okay.
Yep. Hard maple. Very, very common tree around here. Most of it right now is coming just north of Nashville that we're using, and we only burn 2 or 3 times a week. So you guys were actually kind of lucky to get to see it going.
It was amazing to walk into the location that had 70, I think, 70.
72 vats.
72 vats, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we got 72 vats right in here, and then up here on the hill we got about another dozen, so a little over 80.
So I got to tell you, man, the innovation over the last few years for you guys, I mean, by coming out with obviously the bonded, the triple mash, things like that, and then I look back at like the ones that I've been lucky enough to try that have made it through like all the people's hands in Tennessee, like the Coy Hill and the twice barreled rye and things like that. Tell us a little bit about that side of the innovation. Like, is there anything coming in the next 5 to 10 years? Are you going to just continue those type of things and then work kind of from there? What does that look like for you guys?
Yes, and yes, and that's fun. That's why I specifically call out innovation on those kind of 4 or whatever your question was. But so yeah, as a distiller, look, I mean, the consistency of our products, especially Old Number 7, and the quality of Old Number 7, I mean, that permeates through everything that we do. We talked about the bonded, but Coy Hill, if that Coy Hill single barrel had not been bottled as Coy Hill single barrel, it would have gone into Old Number 7. Every drop of that whiskey would have gone into a bottle of Old Number 7. 1,000%. And so, a lot of people are just, it blows their mind. And so, well, it's exactly the same whiskey, right? It's the same process, same everything. Now granted, that all came out of the buzzard's roost of a couple of houses up here on Coy Hill. Super dark, super rich. I use the word dense. I don't know if there's ever been a denser whiskey that I've been a part of anyway. Some of those barrels finish off at like 159, 160 proof.
I just call it tasty.
That's good too. It was delicious and so unique. But that, so that line is what we call our single barrel special release. It started with what we call our heritage barrel. So really, really heavy toasted barrel. We use the word heritage to describe it because we really did that. And Jeff was really a big part of that, initial release of heritage barrel because, we did that to kind of honor what the barrel would have been like back in Jack's day. And so when they put those barrels down and thinking that, it was outside on, over an open fire, how well was a barrel really charred when you're doing that? Thinking it was maybe more toast than really char. And of course now we can control that. And so every barrel that we get and we want that 13-minute toast on there first, which is going to caramelize and form that nice rich red layer, and then about a 25-second char, which would give you a 3 to 4 char level. But to do that in only 25 seconds, it's really that toast before that that's raising the temperature to about 700 degrees and holding it for 13 minutes. There's your flavor right there from that barrel. So that kind of started. We will continue single barrel special release. We are working on one right now as we speak. It should be bottled in the next 2 weeks. It should roll out, I don't know, I would say September-ish, depending on what part of the country you're in. I'm super excited for this release. I will tell you a little bit of a spoiler. How about that? I'll give you as much as I think I can, and our PR people might freak out, but that's okay. I'll take one for the team. It will be a Coy Hill house that we're pulling this from again. Will be different. It's one of the things I want to continue to kind of tell the story of process. And I don't, the first Coy Hill release was fantastic. In some ways, I'm more excited about this because we're pulling this off of multiple levels now of one of our houses, not just the Buzzard's Roost. It may not be right at 10 years old yet, but it's really darn close to his 10th birthday if it's not. Coming out of a couple of the more of the mid floors. It's going to open up way more variation because now we're off of 2 different floors that each have 3 tiers. So 6 different levels of where these barrels have aged for almost 10 years. And so I've described it as kind of peeling back layers of an onion. And it's going to be really, really cool. You're going to have a huge proof swing, I believe. I think you're going to see some way down in the 120s, maybe even slightly less. And then you're going to see some that are going to get way up into the 130s. So I think we will easily see a 20-point proof swing in this. So again, you're not going to get all those big, huge high proofs that you got because of those Buzzard's Roost barrels. But now you're going to get, in my opinion, a lot more nuances because you're seeing multiple levels of any given house. So I'm excited for that one. So stay tuned. And I know that I'm not really giving you too big of a spoiler because the label's already been approved by the TTB. It's out there. It's online. People have already found it. So I know I didn't spill all the beans, but I think you can tell I'm pretty excited for this one.
So I'm going to slide you my business card. It has my address on it. Just feel free. Put that thing in the mail. We'll be good to go.
I wish I could. I don't think that would be good for my career, though. The government would frown upon that. All that
just a little bit.
All that tax stuff. I don't know that I can go there.
The government ruins everything, don't they?
No comment.
All the fun stuff.
No comment.
All right. What is something that you brought to Jack Daniel's that your predecessors might not have done from improving the processes or to improve the brand?
Oh, man. Whoa. Gosh, I don't know. I think... the answer is innovation, but I think that's more of a function of just the time that we're in. When my granddad was here, they couldn't make enough Old Number 7. We didn't even export one bottle of Old Number 7 until like 1984. My granddad was retired 5 years later, and you think about it, now we sell more Old Number 7 outside the U.S. than we do inside the U.S. It's amazing. And so it's really just a function of where we're at, and we will continue to evolve and do what we do based on, what our friends out there that love our product and how it's being consumed and the nuances and the flavors and things. And obviously now, you see Old Number 7, you got single barrel, and you've got all our bottle and bond stuff. That's really a function of where the industry has gone. And you talk about, the other innovation that we've done. We want a whiskey that, somebody that's brand new to whiskey is going to enjoy. We want whiskeys that people that have tried hundreds of whiskeys are going to enjoy and be able, nuance and flavors and things. So, I think to answer that question, it is the innovation. And Jeff was very much, supportive of me, when I was, in the assistant role, really, let me push innovation in some areas that I really wanted to go and push in. And he allowed me to do that. And he was awesome to work for. And he's another one that was massively influenced on my career. Really, the opportunity for me to move back here, it wasn't necessarily about moving back to Lynchburg. Yes, my family is from here. My wife is from Louisville, Kentucky. And the opportunity to work for Jeff Arnett was why I moved back here, directly, to be in that role right there with him. That was what it was for me. And so, he really allowed me to kind of dig in on innovation and things, and which was fantastic. I would say one caveat to that, Master Distiller gets too much credit. we've got a freaking great team here. I mean, you guys, probably saw a lot of them here, making our charcoal, making our whiskey. I mean, we've got so many good whiskey makers here.
Does Hunter scare you? That dude's got hands like a bear.
Yeah, right. There's a lot more than just him.
Yeah, we met him during the tour. We had a couple of questions because, good Lord, those column stills are massive. Those are probably the largest I think we've seen, on tours. I think it was a 72-inch column still.
Yeah, the two big ones are 72. Yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
And this is width. It's I believe they said it was 40 feet tall, and every 2 feet there are those racks, internal racks to catch stuff.
Yeah,
Plates.
so there's plates in there. With downcomers, on either side as it works its way down. So there's 20 plates. Typical beer entry is around plate 18 or so. So there's a couple plates above, kind of in the reflux section of the top of the still. And then usually there's, about 18 stripping trays, below that beer feed. So
that we're respectful of your time. Let's go ahead and go through the rest of the tasting, and you tell us exactly what you want people to experience or what you think they should be. People should experience whiskey the way they want to experience, but how you intended it, I guess, or Jack Daniel's intended it.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. We'll do it. We'll jump in. Let's we went with Old Number 7. Hopefully that's not your first ever taste of Old Number 7.
It's gone down quick, already fast.
It's gone.
I think I will just wrap that up. I'll just say, I think the magic of Number 7 is, it is a very soft, sweet, approachable whiskey. Obviously, it's certainly light. It's meant to be super mixable. That's part of it as well. Or you can enjoy it just like this. Enjoy it neat. A couple cubes of ice, perfect. I never saw Old Number 7 get mixed in anything growing up. And in our house, it was, 2 ice cubes or 3. That was the only decision you ever made.
So it's funny, real quick to piggyback on that. The ready-to-drink product that you guys have released recently, I was shocked at how good that was. I was scared. I was really scared when I tried it. And I was like, man, but the Jack and Coke is solid.
Yep.
I mean, was that part of the innovation that, because I don't remember it being out before the last few years.
Yeah, we had a Jack and Cola, but a couple years ago we finally had an official partnership with Coca-Cola, based in Atlanta, and I think obviously when you get their flavor people in tune with our flavor people, good things happen. I think we all knew that. Jack and Coke is probably the number one called cocktail in the world. It's certainly the number one branded called cocktail in the world. And so, two classic, American brands, beverages both made in the Southeast, and actually started within just a few years of each other. I can't remember exactly when Coca-Cola was founded and started in Atlanta, but it's not far off of 1866, I don't think. So it's how ironic that it's become what it is.
Yeah, really was just in a couple of 100 miles of each other, really.
Yeah, a couple 100 miles. That's it.
So this single barrel, so these have become kind of my favorites. I go out and hunt at the liquor stores and things like that for people that have done different barrel picks and things, just because I'm always curious what everybody else, is looking for when they do a barrel pick. So what do you look for on a barrel pick? And let's just kind of walk through this one.
Yeah, sure. So single barrel are upper floors of barrel houses. So heat rises. We don't cycle houses. That's another thing that we just choose not to do. We've experimented, at least since my granddad was probably 10 years into his career, the 60s, we were cycling and trying to see. No, we decided not to do that. We still have decided not to do that. So the top floors obviously get a lot hotter. We talked about obviously the Coy Hill product. That was, prime example. But those single barrels, you want the individual barrel character to kind of shine through a little bit more. You're not combining barrels together like you would for other products. And so, to me, I kind of break it down into 3 ranges. There's kind of that sweet, kind of forward concentration of flavor, more reminiscent of an classic Old Number 7, where you're going to get the sweet, fruity notes on the tip of the tongue, and the oak tends to be a little softer through the mid palate. Then on the other end of it, you're going to suddenly get into some barrels that Mother Nature on those top floors is just going to make it a really darker, spicier, more tannic, more stringent whiskey, more on the back end than typically longer finish. Have a lot more oak influence to it. And then kind of the middle bucket is that kind of really balanced, creamy texture you get, which is kind of my favorite, to where, you get a little sweetness, you get a little bit of oak on the back end, but it's really more about those kind of sweet brown confectionery notes that sit across the mid palate. And those are actually kind of my favorite barrels, that just, it's all about mouthfeel, creaminess, and it all kind of works together. I love it at 47%, 94 proof. I mean, this is going to be typically between 5 and 7 years. I think we're right at about an average of 6 years right now for single barrel. And so to me, that is really coming into a nice sweet spot. You know, every house is a little different, but you know, if you just had to say, hey, one age, you're not going to move it, 5 to 7 years, upper floor, as a general rule, that's really good for us.
Now, you just recap. You became Master Distiller about 2012, 2013, around here, right?
Yeah, I came back and I started January 2014. Yeah.
All right. So right now, that means that you have some probably 10-year-old gems sitting around somewhere in some of the rick houses that you first started and you barreled, right?
Part of, yes. Well, Jeff was still here too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you come across any of those gems that's just kind of like marked them and kind of set them aside, maybe like, you know, family reserve or something along those lines?
No, not for just. That's a great idea, though. I like where you're going with that. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I could afford a whole barrel of whiskey, though, to be honest with you.
Now, come on now.
I tell you.
Come on.
I tell you.
He's got a few hidden barrels in the cave system here by the springs.
You know, I mean, we've got a lot of cool stuff out there that we have held back for special projects and things. I mean, you've started to see a lot of it with the 12-year-old, the 10-year-old that we've done. We're going to continue, you know, to honor the old age-stated range that Mr. Jack did. The next one on tap for next year will be a 14-year-old. It should be rolling hopefully early next year. We do have 14-year-old barrels here aging right now, and so you know we're literally just recreating that old age-stated series that Jack did. You know, it's pretty easy. It's part of our history. You know, obviously the way, you know, American whiskey and our, you know, friends that love to try different and unique experiences. And what does farther aging American whiskey get you? What does proof variation get you? People are into that. They're interested in that. Why not offer it? And it's fun for me to be able to, you know, kind of help create those things. So, yes, we do have some cool stuff laying down, but, you know, we're going to continue to innovate not only with age and proof in the bottle. We're going to innovate with what we're doing with barrels. We're going to innovate with what we're doing with grains and more unique grain bills and different things that we can do. I mean, start to finish, every part of the process we will continue to innovate with, and we have things laid down. It's just, you know, it just takes time. It takes years to get it out the door.
So where do you see whiskey being in a sweet spot? Like I've always said that I think 7 years is kind of where whiskey gets really good, and then it kind of levels out and gets, you know, where you can start to get too oaky at probably around 12 years. Where's kind of your like opinion on that?
I think it depends on what you do. And I think, you know, kind of barrel house, you know, if you're cycling barrel houses, so then you're kind of smoothing out those seasonal differences, right? And so you're literally trying to make a barrel house the same top to bottom. Well, I know you can't exactly do that, but that's sort of the goal. You know, we choose not to do that. So yeah, if we leave a barrel on the top floor for 12 years, no. I mean, I think we could get it 9, 10, and we've done it. You know, that the original Coy Hill was a 9-year-old. You know, we've got, you know, obviously something that's, you know, right around 10, you know, coming out right now. But you got to stay on top of that stuff. Mm-hmm. I mean, you do. You gotta make sure you're not pushing it too far. So when we've done age-stated things and extended the aging process, we've moved barrels around down to, you know, lower floors and gotten them out of there. And so to me, I mean, it can be done. Takes a lot more work, and you have to be a lot more cautious. But, you know, thankfully for us, we can move things down to a bottom floor somewhere, and it never really get much above 80 degrees ever, and the humidity stays really, really high. You actually lose proof on those lower floors because of the humidity around those barrels, and so that, however, creates a really nice, I call it kind of slow simmering environment. So you can put something up on a top floor and just sear it, right? You think about, you know, cooking a steak or something, and then you can kind of move it down, and that's what we've done. For us, I mean, if you just had to say average barrel, center cut barrel house, yeah, I would agree 7, 8, 9, you know, somewhere in there would be really great. But you know what? You're going to find some 5-year-old barrels that are dynamite too. It's just not always a hard and fast rule, because the only thing that goes into this product that adds flavor, you know, grains, yeast, obviously, barrel, that's it. Nothing else adds any flavor. And so the variation there, when you're only dealing with that, you know, to add flavor to your product, you know, there's always going to be those exceptions to the rule that are out there, which again is part of the fun of doing what we do.
One of the benefits and joys of being on a podcast like this is getting to experience different bourbons and whiskeys and ryes that are outside of my normal buying power, just because some of these guys are very generous with their offerings. And just I know as a casual drinker up to a few years ago that I've been able to really enjoy things that I never thought I could on my own through the connections and relationships that you make, not just through the podcast, but through other distilleries that we've been a part of. And I think it's really impressive to me that Jack Daniel's is in that affordable range for most, even like the products like the Bonded is slowly becoming one of my favorite kind of daily sippers now. And I can get it at Sam's Club, which is great. But I'm like, since we live in that age right now of kind of a very frustrating bourbon secondary market on a lot of allocated stuff, I applaud Jack Daniel's for being not just readily available, but just affordable so people can enjoy it. And you don't have to be some very big, well-to-do, whiskey aficionado to enjoy the products that you present. So thank you for that.
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, it's certainly, I don't get to control price. In fact, the company can only put it out at an MSRP. So, a retailer could do what they want with the price. We cannot control that. And then, of course, the secondary, nobody. That's just the Wild West. And I don't know. I don't collect whiskey. I don't buy and sell. That's just not something that I do. But it is certainly sometimes a little crazy out there. I agree. I've seen it. But our philosophy here with whatever we're doing, innovative, is this will make great whiskey. Just put it in the decent package. Let's sell it at a fair price.
So speaking of Bonded, I think next up to bat, right?
Yeah, we'll go Bonded right now. Yeah, absolutely. Bonded Tennessee whiskey. Yeah, so this is probably $30-ish somewhere. I don't know, somewhere in that ballpark.
Yeah, I think that's where they fall at where we're at.
Yeah, but we're about, I think it was between 22 and 24 at Sam's, I think, right now. So yeah, we keep this on the shelf.
Yeah, for sure.
So the funny thing is, this is the only one that I feel like when I drink the Bonded Jack Daniels, to me, it's the only one that doesn't taste like traditional Jack Daniels. Mm-hmm. I get peanuts when I drink this, which is just weird from all the other products that y'all present.
Yeah, I can see that. Now, I will say, so here's the difference here. This is not just Old Number 7 at 100 proof. When we dump barrels, we'll dump, let's just say 1,000 barrels in a day. So that liquid, once it comes out of the barrel, will go into, probably 2 or 3 different bulk whiskey tanks. We have about a dozen of those. So we'll go in, the quality team will start sampling those tanks, after we've dumped these barrels in it. And you're going to have a little bit of variation, right? Not much because we've dumped a bunch of barrels, but depending on what locations, because they're probably pulling out of at least 2 different, if not 3 barrel locations, maybe bottom floor, maybe top floor, maybe whatever, middle floor. So you're going to have different levels of color, right? And different levels of color in our whiskey because the color is barrel, that is flavor. That's going to be another level of kind of variation. So then we build batches based on that. So an Old Number 7 batch, we want to taste like every single bottle came right out of the middle of a barrel house, right? We want to take as much lighter, lower floor whiskey, and I'm very much generalizing here, and then some darker whiskey, and bring that together to make it the same. With the Bonded Tennessee whiskey, and obviously the 100 proof in the bottle makes a huge change too, but we are targeting those bulk tanks with darker whiskeys in them. So generally upper half of floors. That is going to be more oak extracted into the product, and that's going to compete. That astringency, there's more tannic acid in there, things that are going to compete against those kind of estery, fruity notes for sure. So I definitely get what you're picking up there and where you're coming from. No doubt about it. You're exactly right.
I just called it the Elvis, is what I call it when we're at home. My wife always laughs. I'm like, can you pour me a little Elvis? And that's she knows. Go get the Jack Daniel's Bonded.
There you go.
It's like peanut butter and banana.
I love it. From Memphis, Tennessee. I guess from Mississippi originally, but made his home in Memphis. I love it. I mean, obviously Whiskey of the Year in 2022, how gratifying is that to think that the same recipe of whiskey that Mr. Jack won 7 global awards as best whiskey in the world, years later we win the 8th as best whiskey in the world in 2022 with the same exact recipe whiskey. I mean, it's awesome.
Let's talk about the triple mash now.
Yeah, triple mash.
What was the inspiration behind this?
Yeah, so we had started the whole bottle and bond range, if I could just go there for a minute, a few years ago as going through innovation. And one of the things that I am very passionate about is transparency. I want you to know everything about how we make our whiskey. I want you guys to know. I want, everybody down on Broadway right now and enjoying a Jack Daniels in Nashville to know. I want everybody to know how we make our whiskey. I want you to know the grain bill and the importance of it. I want you to know about our yeast and the importance of it. And our, we have Coopers in our company, that are making barrels. And, this is really, really important to me. As a distiller, obviously it is, right? The process is so important. But in a day and age where transparency is not the most forthcoming thing in American whiskey, we felt like Bottle and Bond was perfect, right? And so Bottle and Bond was created in the late 1800s when there was lots of rectifiers and blenders buying whiskeys from distilleries. Now, who knows what they were blending in the 1800s, right? Well, let's fast forward to, 2024. What's happening? There's hundreds of bourbon brands out there coming out of about 8 distilleries, major distilleries, There easily 300 different bourbon brands. Guys, there's a lot of brands. There's not a lot of whiskeys. Think about it. And so, and we probably took advantage here. Obviously, every single drop of whiskey that is distilled here in Lynchburg leaves with only one brand, Jack Daniels. And we make great rye, bottle and bond, and single barrels. There's only one brand here. One, Jack Daniels. That is it. And so, as much as we talk about that in the process with Old Number 7 and our single barrels, we felt like the bottle and bond designation, because you have to disclose single distiller right there, distilled by Jack Daniel Distillery in Lynchburg, Tennessee. You go pick up at least half of the bottles on the shelf. They don't say distilled by. Might say produced by.
Yeah. Usually the bottled and even distillery are different towns.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Yeah, could be. Or even just completely made up trademarks, and that distillery doesn't exist. It's just a trademark that they've registered, It's just a figment of some marketer's imagination.
Yeah, transparency is so important, at least for I think, us purists. Like, that's the big thing that we're always looking for is transparency, and we love the fact that you guys are so transparent about things.
Yeah, and that's exactly why Bottle and Bond came down the line. Certainly started with Tennessee whiskey, and I'll tell you a story. I mentioned our friends in the marketing department. I don't know if any of you guys are marketers. You can tell I have a very special relationship with our marketing team here at Jack Daniels. Now, I like them. I really do. Nobody's going to believe it after they listen to this, but the idea for Triple Mash, I'm going to give them some credit, is some of our marketing team came to me and they said, Chris, we're reading articles and things online that these whiskey consumers are really into buying different whiskeys, and they're taking them home and they're blending them at like their kitchen sink, and they'll like vat them in a decanter or something, and if you take some of this, and some of this, it'll taste like that, and it's really a cool thing. And I thought, okay, that's fine. They said, well, couldn't we do something, blending or whatnot? And it's like, well, I said, guys, I'm a distiller, I'm not really a blender. Don't know. And, my hesitation, American blended whiskey only has to be about 20%, right? Straight whiskey. The rest can be neutral spirits, vodka. And so that was probably my hesitation at first. And then they said, well, yeah, we got a couple million barrels aging, surely we could do better than a kitchen sink, right? And I was like, oh, okay, look, we'll go in, we'll see, we'll sample some barrels, we'll do some things. I said, if we do this, it will be a blend of only straight whiskeys, obviously only made right here in Lynchburg. And they said, absolutely, you do it, free reign, go for it. And so a couple of us, started out, and looking and what we might want to do. Of course, we've been making Tennessee whiskey a while. We've been distilling rye whiskey, distilling it since 2011. We've been distilling our malt whiskey, or what we call our single malt whiskey, since late 2012. So as I was kind of going through and looking through spreadsheets and inventories and things, I think because we had just kind of worked on the bonded Tennessee whiskey, the Bottle and Bond was in the back of my head, and I realized we had made all of these within the same seasons. The 6-month window, spring and fall of each year that you have to hit for Bottle and Bond. And I just kind of wondered, I wonder if we blended these whiskeys together, if we could still call it Bottle and Bond, because the Bottle and Bond reg doesn't say you can do that at all. It does not say that. I mean, it is very much inferred. Bottle and Bond whiskey is a regulation around straight American whiskey to start with. Now, these are all straight American whiskeys. So, we put it together, applied, for the label approval. I didn't know that we would get approval or not, but we did, obviously. And what we do is we take and we build this. Now, the blend, I know the name Triple Mash. You think we're blending it at the mashing part of the process. No, it's blended after the whiskeys come out of the barrel. So we take Bottle and Bond rye, we take Bottle and Bond Tennessee whiskey, and Bottle and Bond of our malt whiskey, and blend them at the very end before it's bottled. Okay, the ratio 60% is rye, right? Not the grain in the mash. 60% of the whiskey blend is rye whiskey. 20% of the whiskey blend is Tennessee whiskey, and then, of course, 20% of the whiskey blend is malt whiskey, 100% malted barley whiskey. That's the breakdown.
About how long did it take you to decide those were what you wanted to put in that bottle?
A few months. We did a distillery release here with Jessica Hartline, who's awesome, former, distiller, has been in the quality department now for many, many years, one of our key players there. She did a really great distillery blend with only the Tennessee whiskey and the rye whiskey. And so that kind of sparked it. And then she and myself and a couple of others, we're tasting through, basically how much malt do we want to put in it was the question. The malt doesn't have a ton of character compared to corn and rye. Right? Corn is really sweet, rye is spicy, malt, it's kind of bready. But at that 20%, when you taste this, go ahead and jump into the triple mash. Number one, the fruity character is really different here. There's red fruit, there's berry, there's plum, way, way, way different. So the malt is really changing how those esters are expressing. And then across the mid-palate, if you just hold a little bit across the mid-palate, you get the texture of the malt. That kind of creamy, almost toasted bread, biscuity kind of texture in the mid-palate, which is also where the spiciness of the rye comes out. So it's really, really cool. And then it actually gets sweeter on the finish. The Tennessee whiskey kind of rounds it out. So,
yeah, 100%. It's that mid palate is where it really drives home so much flavor.
Yeah, speaking of that single malt, I know a lot of the single malt releases right now are kind of like, I think, duty free. Do we know if it's going to be getting out to public anytime soon?
I don't know. I have no good spoilers for that one. Okay. I'm sorry.
It's all good.
I think that I love the product in duty free because we can get it all over the world. And American whiskey is still not well known outside the U.S. You walk into a bar anywhere else in the world, South America, Asia, probably most of Europe, and you talk about black label whiskey, you do not get Jack Daniels. In fact, it's not even thought of. So the opportunity for us to take, malt whiskey, which, hey, our friends over in Scotland have been making whiskey even longer than the U.S., obviously. And, as the British were sailing all over the world, they brought their whiskey with them way back in the day. And so people know malt whiskey. And I think it's just a massive, massive opportunity for us. And I don't know that we've ever worked harder on an innovation here with our single malt, just learning about, what we wanted to do with the barley. Then the barrel, and it spent 6-7 years in the new oak, as it has to be for an American, straight malt whiskey first of all, and then we made the decision to finish it in Oloroso sherry butts that we shipped over from Spain, brand new, coming over. We're working on getting some more over. Big investments, as you can imagine, in getting that done, and then it finished out about 3 years in those sherry butts. So I mean, this was a big project for us. Now, obviously, what goes into the bottle and bond at 20% is not sherry finished at all. It's only that 6-year-old coming out of the new oak.
Just the core stuff.
Yes, the core stuff, exactly. Yeah, because then if the sherry would be a flavoring, right, in the eyes of the TTP, it would then become a flavored whiskey from the sherry. And then, obviously, that would not qualify as bottle and bond.
Correct. All right, last one. We got the bonded rye, and I know we're butting up on your time frame, so I just want to be respectful of that. So if you want to go through that one real quick.
Yeah, let's jump in. I think our rye whiskey at 70% rye is that appropriate balance. We had a former distillery manager here that was really adamant on 70% rye, and I give him the credit. His name was Jerry Hamilton. And so 100%, that 70% rye, of course, we got to hold that 12% malted barley in there. And then the balance, it would have to be 18% corn. The balance that we had as soon as we started distilling this in 2011, I was still in R&D at the time. We thought we just got to get the right amount of barrel on this. And I think moving it to 100 proof. This one, depending on when this was actually bottled, I think right now we're bottling 8-year-old. This would be a 7.5 or 8, depending on the season where we were coming from. Mm-hmm. But I mean, right at an 8-year-old 100 proof rye whiskey at that price point, really nice, really, really nice.
Oh, definitely.
These are quickly becoming my favorites. Yeah. I mean, they really are.
Yeah, I tell you what I love with this rye, our bonded rye and an old fashioned. A lot of people don't reach for 100%, rye, but the sweetness from our yeast. And that, 7.5 to 8-year-old in the oak, you throw that with that twist of citrus and some bitters, wow, it's really good.
Yeah, but I say both me and my wife are very big fans of using rye inside of old fashions because it just gives a different complexity.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree. And I'm terrible at cocktail. The only cocktail I can make is an old fashioned. Actually, it's either that or 2 ice cubes or 3. That's all I got. You can ask my wife. It's true. But gosh, we started making our old fashions with our bonded rye, and I mean, we've never set out to say, hey, we're going to make a whiskey that's perfect for any cocktail or whatever. But daggum, I think we might have done it with this one. It is just made for an old fashioned.
All right, the hardest question of the day: if you're not drinking Jack Daniels, what are you drinking?
Oh, I like everything, almost everything. I'll say, it just depends. We drink wine. I like a good beer. Obviously, I got a lot of great friends that still make great bourbons. I've always had a soft spot for Old Forester. That's that's part of Brown Forman. That's George Garvin Brown, founding brand. Lived in Louisville for 11 years, so that probably has something to do with it too. But as long as the spirit is quality is made well, and it has balance. It's not just it's not just all caramel, vanilla, oak, and that's about it. More underlying nuances. Those esters that pop and things is what I look for. I will admit I do overanalyze it, no question about it. It's just I'm a chemist that makes whiskey. That's just what
It's in your blood.
Yeah, it's in my blood. There you go, exactly. But I love tequila. I love a nice, and I like the more fruit forward agave focused tequila for sure. Spent a lot of time in Mexico with different projects when Brown Forman acquired tequila business years ago, and kind of fell in love a little bit with what goes on down there in Jalisco and making great tequila. So yeah, as long as something is put together well, then I've got great respect for it. So
I remember asking this question a few weeks ago when we interviewed the guy from Redemption. And so to kind of piggyback on your question, Scott, to give it some weight here, if it is your last day on Earth, if the zombie apocalypse breaks out, and I love this question. I'm Johnny Tsunami. I ask the crazy questions, right? Mm-hmm. And I really want to know because it's fascinating. If you were bitten on the arm and you knew the last bottle that you were going to drink, what would it be?
Okay. Since you went there, I'm gonna go there with you. I have a bottle in my office from 1965-ish, 4 or 5, that a friend of mine in Chestnut Hill, or outside of Boston, owns a family liquor store. His grandfather used to run that liquor store. And about 5-6 years ago, he sent me an email and said, "Hey, Chris, I'm going to send you a package." I said, "All right, man, sounds great." A few days later, his box comes in, open it up, there's this letter inside with this bottle of Jack Daniel sealed from the mid-1960s. He wrote me this letter. He said, "Hey, Chris, my family business, my grandfather, running this store here in Boston. I wanted to send you this bottle that your grandfather made." And he said, "I only have one condition. You can't just put it up on your shelf. You have to open it and enjoy it with your granddad." And so this was probably around October, early fall. So that Thanksgiving, we cracked that bottle open with the whole family, and we all had some whiskey that my grandfather made. And we put a big dent in that bottle. There's not much left, but there's a little bit left in that bottle that I still have. So on that day, if that occurs, that's the bottle I'm grabbing right there.
And that's awesome. Absolutely fantastic. All right, so if people want to find Jack Daniels, where do they come? Like if they want to come to a distillery tour or any of that type of thing, you want to give them that, and then I'll sign us out.
Absolutely, yeah. JackDaniels.com. You can sign up, register for our tours online. I do highly recommend advanced reservations. If you're coming to Nashville, if you can spend half a day or something, take the drive out in the countryside, have some lunch down here at Miss Mary Bobo's, fantastic lunch spot, and then come take our tour. Before you make your way back up to Nashville, and we'd love for everybody to come see us.
Good deal. Thank you so much. Well, I guess that's our episode of Bourbon Barrel Talk. If you want to find us, you can find us on Facebook, the Instagram, or the X. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. That way you get our episodes as soon as they're downloaded on Sunday. This is Scott, Johnny Tsunami, the Brox, and Chris signing off. Peace.
Prost.
Peace out.
Later.